There's a poem by a poet, Harriet Mullen, from 1953. She's an African American poet, lived in Alabama, called Shedding Skin. Pulling out the old scarred skin, old rough thing I don't need now, I strip off, slip out of, leave behind. I slough off dead scales, flick skin flakes to the ground, shedding toughness, peeling layers down to vulnerable stuff. And I'm blinking off old eyelids for a new way of seeing. By the rock I rub against, I'm going to be tender again. So maybe you know about snakes. Snakes shed their skin to allow for further growth and to remove parasites that may have attached to their old skin. I didn't know that. So as a snake grows, its skin gets stretched out, and unlike human skin, a snake's skin doesn't grow as the animal grows. So eventually, the snake's growth reaches a point where it cannot go any further until that skin is sloughed off. So we could use the same sentence. Monks and nuns must shed their skins to allow for further growth and to remove parasites that have attached to the old skin. So we don't know this a lot, but throughout our lives we take on identities, which Venerable Children is so very good at reminding us of. It's an important teaching, but we take them on and wear them as tightly as layers of skin. And there are some we can recognize easily. Yes, I'm a woman, I have that identity. I'm a boomer, I'm sorry, I have that identity. I'm American, I'm Southern, everybody knows that. That's an identity. And some of our identities we must willingly and knowingly abandon when we come to the monastery, when we take precepts. Because the actions that are like a result of those identities are prohibited by our precepts. I am a business owner. Well, you give that up. I'm a musician. You give that up. That may take longer than you think it's going to, but you do. I am the source of my mother's happiness. That's an identity. And slowly we have to see how that works and we have to give it up. I am a person who wears Ariat boots. That one you give up right away. Some people have, I'm a person with beautiful hair. It was not mine, but you know, that goes right away. Or I'm a meat and potatoes kind of gal. We give up the meat right away. And I don't want to minimize this, actually. As people who are exploring our monastic aspirations and consider monastic life, we have to look directly at these kinds of identities and determine how and why we would put them down. And get really clear about that. I mean, in my case, I loved my work. I loved what I did. It helped people. It was a great source of creative expression for me. I was almost always in relationship and in connection with like-minded people. I got to travel. My business partners were always people who were very dear to me. I didn't make much money, but I had adopted an identity of being a starving artist, so actually that fed also, who I thought I was. So it was okay. And when I had, over the course of my career, I had created a little empire. It was a small, but it was an empire, to reflect back to me all the praise, all the appreciation, all the approval I need to know that I was okay in the world. I was very good at that. So you could ask, if the career was so all-fulfilling, what was I doing thinking about ordination? Which I did for many years. I also spent many years trying not to think about ordination, but that's a different story. But truthfully, Venerable Children said this yesterday, and I can't emphasize it enough. We have studied the Buddha's teachings. We have to conclude that the Buddha was absolutely telling the truth. Absolutely telling the truth when he identified the unsatisfactory situation that we're in, and absolutely telling the truth about, that every level of what we're experiencing in life is unsatisfactory, no matter how subtly we look. We have to be convinced of that. We have to be convinced that that he correctly identified the source. That our own minds, the afflictions in our minds, are distorted ways of seeing things that propels us into actions that create negative karma. And we have to be convinced that actually that this can be removed. I don't know that we have to be 100% convinced, but we have to be pretty sure that it's worth a try and that there's a way to do that. I think as the years go by, if we don't know why we've taken these precepts, then when this identity gets challenged, sometimes, the more subtler ones, we don't know why we would hang on to it. In a really superficial way, why would I, not go to Starbucks and get a little treat when I'm out by myself? On one superficial way. On a deeper and more damaging way, why wouldn't I follow that nice person who thinks I'm extremely interesting? We could go for a long walk. We have to know why we've taken these precepts and why we've, quote, given up. Because we don't give up. We genuinely choose to shed the things that are preventing us from our full potential, that are to shed the things that are preventing us from being a benefit to other beings. But we have to know that. So there comes, when you come to the monastery, there's also the subtler piece, and that's really what I want to talk about today. We have to start letting go of the identities we don't know we have. Or maybe we suspect we have, but we don't think they're a real problem. And these are the ones that get challenged in the monastery. And for us to grow in practice and to become bodhisattvas, these are the skins we have to shed. And they are, in my experience, and I think I can speak for the other people here, the most painful ones to shed. I'm starting to recognize that when it's painful, then that's what's happening. So everybody who's been here for any length of time has been through this. We've talked about this. If you live out in the world 30, 40, 50 years, you think you know something. Maybe not everything about everything, but something. And in some cases, we think we know a lot about some things. So we come here, for example, and you're living with all these people who have extremely different ideas. How important is it that my idea be expressed, right? For example, one of my pet peeves, and I'm just going to bring it up, we love peaches here. Everybody here loves to eat peaches. We keep our hard peaches in the refrigerator. Now, I grew up in Georgia. I know about peaches. Peaches need to be ripened before they go into the refrigerator. But, after a while, I give up. I'm not going to fight about peaches anymore, although I have. But what I also see is those hard peaches go in the refrigerator. They come out hard. They come out mushy. People eat them just as much as they eat the juicy ones. Drop it. So those are the kinds of things, too, that it's really this whole belief system around this identity of being a Southerner. I know about peaches. I may even be totally right. Everybody on the internet says the same thing. Drop it. How important is that to the harmony in the community, and how important is that do I have to be right about this? I'll feel them all and make sure they're a little bit soft before I'll eat one, but that's the way that is. But there's even these deeper level ones, and things like, I am a person who rarely makes mistakes. I am a person that generally people like. Others might have, I'm a person who always messes up. That's another identity that people come with. And actually, you can have both of those. I'm a person who rarely makes mistakes because really I'm a person who always messes up. Or I'm a person who's generally disliked. We may have that idea. So and then we devise all these, unconsciously, all these strategies to behave in ways that reinforce these identities. But we come to the monastery and we find out that here, they don't work so well. Now, it takes a long time to figure that out. They don't work, but we keep trying. And we try, we try, and we try, because they've always worked. But here, they don't work. For example, and I will take this to my grave, I was raised on praise. I was criticized also, which was to keep me in line, but the praise part was the carrot that I was raised to. And so I learned to measure my value, my worth, on how much praise I got. Even applause. Okay, I was also raised on applause. So I'd arranged my whole life, not necessarily knowingly exactly to get the applause that I get. And honestly, people may not believe this, but I did have other motivations too. I did have some virtue in what I was doing, but I got very, very good at strategies to get what I needed to bolster my self-confidence. So then you come to the monastery, and you live with people who don't like what you do. You live with your teacher whose job description specifically states she's supposed to point out your faults. That is her job. And I hired her. And I want to tell you, all of you, for the praise hungry, there is no praise. Now, if you come in here truly believing that the world hates you, you will be loved until you finally recognize that you are loved. But if you come in here looking for praise, forget it. Now, I also want to say, underneath of that, you are also loved. But as long as you are equating love with praise, you will think you are not loved. Honey, this is hard. It takes a long time. You will starve to death. Because, you know what? Everybody doesn't like me. Everything I do isn't cute. And more to the point, my value as a human being and my potential to become liberated and fully awakened and to lead all others to full awakening is not dependent on other people's opinion of me. Not even my teacher's opinion of me. And that has been painful. So whereas I had always been a valued employee when I had jobs, here it looked like I was an inept fool. Why? Because I wasn't praised. I don't actually know if that's what people were thinking, but that was my read because I didn't get the praise I wanted. I had always been appreciated for taking a leadership role in things. Here, I thought I was being perceived as a bossy bitch. Why? Because I wasn't praised for being a leader. So what do we do with that? You know, we listen to teachings. We have to work with our own minds. We have to figure out what the issue is, whatever your issue is. We have to identify it. Oh, this is attachment. We have to look at the antidotes to attachment to praise, or attachment to whatever it is that we're stuck in. And then we meditate on them over and over and over and over and over and over for years and years and years and years and years. Stripping down, stripping down, stripping down. You're like, who am I if I'm not praised? What's my worth if I'm not praised? What's my motivation for doing what I'm doing if I'm not being praised? I'll tell you one strategy on one retreat. I think it was a White Tara retreat. I even had visualized all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in the space in front would applaud when I sat down to meditate. It was so helpful. It was so helpful. They loved me. I knew that. And they didn't care that I needed it. It was an antidote that worked for that period of time. And because we're in the monastery, this is one of the things that's a benefit of this. We have the luxury of living with the pain of the starvation, of praise starvation, until we can shed the skin to get over it. That is a luxury. Out in the world, you can always go find somebody to praise you if you're good at, if you're really good at bringing it on. And I was very good at it. But deep level changes happens over time. Until, as Venerable Children says, Venerable Tarpa also quotes this all the time, our old habits get so painful that we have to change. And that's what shedding skin is all about. And the question is, if I can't shed the thin skin of attachment to praise, how am I going to shed this body at the time of death? Where will mine be? My mind be. So we look at what we give up, all of the things, whatever your thing is, and we have to ask, if I can't let go of this, how am I going to let go of my attachment to samsara? Forget just death. Forget just this life. How will I ever give up my attachment to samsara if I don't start to shed these skins that I don't even know I have? And so it's a deeper level of thinking about what happens when we come to the monastery. It's not just ordaining. We can ordain and go out into the world, and although we have these guidelines, these precepts that we try to follow, without the guidance of a teacher and a community to support our growth, we can hang on to our skins for a longer time, I think. Maybe not the more superficial ones, but I think the real value in the way the Buddha set it up so brilliantly, so, well, he's an omniscient mind, right? Setting up communities in which we can actually grow and break the bonds that tie us so much to samsara. Living in monastic community is the way to go. So I will go back to Harriet Mullen, who is not a monastic. Pulling out the old scarred skin, old rough thing I don't need now, I strip off, slip out of, leave behind. I slough off dead scales, flick skin flakes to the ground, shedding toughness, peeling layers down to vulnerable stuff. And I'm blinking off old eyelids for a new way of seeing. By the rock of my community I rub against. I'm going to be tender.